Good morning, THB family. Dallas here. And hey, thank you so much for inviting us to wherever you are at this morning. It has been a fantastic worship gathering we've had so far. And I'm really excited about what's about to take place here because you're going to hear from this guy right here, Mr. Carlos Renfro.
Hey, family. It's me again.
So for those of you who don't know, maybe you haven't been part of the Healing Place for very long. Carlos is actually one of our elders here at the Healing Place. He's a tech guru. I know he's saved my life more than once in the techie world.
Hey, it's fun. I love doing it. I love it.
So I'm really excited about today because I love these conversational type of things that we do here at the Healing Place every so often. And one of the things I enjoy, again, Carlos isn't just an elder, but you're a good friend. Yes. And so this is going to be a conversation between friends about a very important subject, which is the Word of God.
Yes.
And what I love about this is this opens up kind of a different mindset. A lot of people, they have this mindset that you can't just talk about God with friends.
Right.
And that's just not the case. Scott last week had this great kind of way of presenting the message through the online community, where it's like, hey, we're all at this table and we're making some decisions. We're having a real life conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's lots of ways to present the Word of God. And conversationally, it's kind of one of those things that's overlooked. You know, it's not always being preached at. It's a lot of times there are good things, and God can speak in this arena, in this form as well.
Exactly. Last week, Scott's message was out of Psalm 16, verse 11. It says, "You will show me the path of life. In your presence is the fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore." And the way he presented that whole message was like, hey, I'm here talking with you. And there's some important things you need to do. There's some intentional steps you got to make.
Yes.
And I just really loved the way it came off. And so I'm really excited about today's conversation because we're going to be going into a really interesting passage here in just a second. If you're new to the Healing Place, we've been going through what we call God's promises. And it's coming out of actually 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 20, which says, "For all the promises of God in him are yes and amen." And so we've been building this foundation of God's promises and how they interact with our life, how we can practically walk them out. And this week, Carlos, you're bringing out a different promise. So what is this week's promise?
This week's promise is going to come out of Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31. It is a very familiar portion of Scripture. Most people have heard it if you've been in church any time at all. It says this, "But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint."
Awesome. Now, run and not grow weary. That's really a fascinating phrase that's in that passage right there. In the physical world, it's not really that possible. I mean, I get winded walking up the stairs sometimes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, but I mean, like, it's not necessarily possible in the physical realm for somebody not to be weary when they go running, right?
Well, not necessarily. And when I was studying this out, a show that I watched a while ago kind of came to mind. If any of you geek fans out there know who Stan Lee is, he's the guy who started Marvel Comics, and he did a show a while ago, around 2005, 2006-ish, called Superhumans. And in this show, they chronicle people basically with genetic mutations that could do things that most people couldn't. There was one guy that was on there that he had the ability, his vocal cords had a mutation in his vocal cords. He can make separate sounds, two separate, very distinct sounds with his own vocal cords, and he did like this strange type of beatboxing where it sounded like multiple people, and it was just him.
That is
amazing. But there was this one guy, his name was Dean Karnazes, and Dean Karnazes, he had the genetic mutation where there's a minimal amount of lactic acid buildup, or almost no lactic acid buildup in his muscle, and he doesn't get tired.
That is crazy.
He's what's called an ultra marathoner, and he can run and not get tired.
Ultra marathoner.
Yes, in fact, when they filmed the show, they filmed him with like a drone, and the vehicle ran alongside him. They did documentary style filming that he ran for about 80 miles. And he got to the end of where they were filming at, and they were like, "All right, you ready to hop in the car and go back?" He's like, "No, I'll run back." He's run over 200 up to 300 miles before without stopping.
That is insane.
That's absolutely insane.
When your tennis shoes give out before you do.
Yes. Yeah, he have to worry about his bones and his heart and things like that because his muscles never get tired.
That is insane. But now, he's the exception to the rule, right? I mean, this is a normal thing.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely not normal. The rest of us, we get tired, and Dan himself is the exception to the rule. And the fact of the matter, physically as well as spiritually, we all get tired.
Yeah.
That's what happened. That's part of the the flow of our physical life. Everybody needs rest at some point. And even spiritually, if you're a Christian, if you're born again, if you're living for God, at some point spiritually you will get tired. And this is what this passage is talking about.
Well, let's get into that. I mean, what does it mean that to be weary? To truly understand what this means, to run and not grow weary, what is the context of that what that says?
All right, right there in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31, we're talking about a time where Israel is being overcome by their enemies. They're in exile. They've been in exile for about 70 years, and they're at a place in their life where they feel abandoned by God. They feel like God's not listening to them anymore. God doesn't hear them, and they're actually weary and they're tired of waiting for deliverance. They're tired. They gotten to the point where, nothing's happening and they're weary and they're tired. And strange things happen when our body gets tired.
Well, like what? Like what happens when your body gets tired?
You experience pain. You can have weakness. A lot of times a loss of mental clarity. I know there's times when you feel like you need a nap or whatever. You're just in this fog and you can't focus right. You can't think right. And that's what happens when your body is crying out and it's asking you and it's calling for rest because it's tired. It needs a reset.
Right. And so, but like spiritually, what does that look like to be weary spiritually?
Well, yeah, things happen. Our spirit kind of responds likewise, that there are things spiritual that happens when we get tired, we can make bad decisions, when we're spiritually tired. Right. We can be challenged. We can be fearful. We can be upset. And that thing, it impairs our judgment from an emotional and a spiritual standpoint. We also we can have that dryness, that feeling that almost like how Israel was, that nothing's happening. I feel like I'm starving. And a lot of you may have been there before. A lot of you have that place where it almost feels like a spiritual desert, and there's nothing there, and you're weary. And, you also can have a lack of spiritual clarity. It's hard to hear the Lord. You don't know the difference between yourself and what's God, what's not God. And that weariness, that tiredness in your spirit, it wears down on you. The same way that you can get physically tired in your body, you can get tired spiritually, and it can be a challenge. And this is what this passage is beginning to address, and it's addressing it in Israel. And also, it's something that we can glean from that, and we can understand for our life as a promise of God as well.
Right. So to this point, we've been talking about being weary, being spiritually weary, and I'm sure some of you guys listening right now, whether you're listening to the podcast, you're watching this during our premiere stream on our website, thpsreport.com, you've been through some of the stuff. If you have, we want to hear about it. Like leave in chat, like say, yes, I've been weary at times. I've been spiritually weary. Leave a comment in the chat. Let us know what that was like for you and what you were going through that maybe led to that. Because a lot of things lead to us being spiritually weary. But how do we avoid, Carlos, being spiritually weary? How do we avoid that?
Well, the good thing about being spiritually weary is that we have access to strength. And that's what, if we read the text again right there, said, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount upon wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not grow faint. There's a key word there that's renew. At that time, you could look at where Israel was. Israel at one point had been a victorious nation. Right. Israel at one point, they had gotten out of Egypt, and they had overcome their enemies. They had been into the promised land. They were able to drive out the enemies that were there. They were able to deal with the giants, spiritually. Right. They had, the beginning of the time of the kings. You had all these things where Israel at one time had been a victorious people, but now they're in a difficult time. Right. Now there's pressure and it feels like distance from God, but God said he will renew their strength. That time of victory is a time where God can recycle and bring that back over. If you've been born again, if you're in a relationship with God, you're right with God, you submitting, you're walking with the Lord, you have had times of victory. Right. And even in our times of challenges, we understand that those times of victory are a reference point, and God promises, that's the beautiful part about this, that God promises that if we are willing to wait on him, we're willing to wait on the Lord, that a time of renewal can come out of that he will, not that he might, not just that he's capable of it, he can, but he will renew our strength.
That's awesome. Also, I think a key phrasing that you kept saying right there was waiting on the Lord.
Yes.
And as someone who is maybe just a little ADD, that's difficult to do.
It is.
So, so I want you guys to do me a favor in the chat, just to remind yourself, type in the word "wait on the Lord." That's a key, essential aspect of this conversation: waiting on the Lord. Now, Carlos, a lot of people, unfortunately, see a delineation between the Old Testament and the New Testament. They unfortunately have the incorrect belief that things in the Old Testament, well, they're just gone. Is there an example, though, in the New Testament reinforce this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The Bible talks about this all the time. I know we talk about, waiting on the Lord and renewing strength. Jesus comes around in Matthew chapter 11.
Yeah.
In the New Testament, in his teaching, he's talking to people, and at this time, once again, another spiritual dry spell. You got at the time of the end of what we consider the Old Testament, or what's as we canon we've made canon out of the Bible, and we line this thing out so it's easy for us to follow. At the time there hadn't been a prophet for over 400 years. And then before John the Baptist shows up, there hadn't been a voice, a word from the Lord. So you have generations of weariness of people not really having the true voice of God until John the Baptist and Jesus show up on the scene. And in Matthew chapter 11, I'm sure this will be somewhere in the chat or something there. Matthew chapter 11, verse 28 through 30 says this: "Come to me, all ye who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take upon me and learn of me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light."
Right.
And this is Jesus. This is Jesus again. Here's a group of people that had to wait on God.
Right.
And he's saying, if you come to me, that Jesus is that source of renewal.
Right.
He's that source of brand new and renewed strength.
Right.
That if you come to me, the yoke of the world is sin.
Right.
And that, man, it's a burden that's too heavy for mankind to bear. We can't. It's a spine breaker. We can't handle it spiritually.
Yeah.
But he said that his yoke is easy, his burden is light. And if you're weary, if you're heavy, if you're burdened, come to me.
Right.
And he gives you his yoke, which it seems almost counterintuitive.
Right.
But his yoke is easy.
Yeah.
And it brings renewal, and it brings strength, and it brings there's access to what God has for us. And that's what Jesus came to do. We come to Christ, and he trades the burden that we have that's too heavy for us to carry. He takes that on his cross,
right.
and then he gives us the one that he intends us to have.
Right.
And that burden is easy and it's light.
Word.
And it's still about depending on God.
Yeah, absolutely. You said something really interesting in the front of the conversation, which was sometime that, like, for the people of Israel at the time, it was a generational thing. There was a burden placed upon them after generation after generation, things passed upon them. I think some of you guys maybe listening right now, maybe you're dealing with it. Maybe there's some generational burdens been put upon you, and it's made you weary. It's made you just physically and spiritually weary. You're trying to walk in joy. You're not understanding why there's this burden, and it's a generational thing. And Jesus is like, hey, let's put a stopgap here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Let's reset things for you.
Absolutely, it's so important for us as the light of the gospel begins to shine onto our life when we enter into a relationship with God, that we allow those crevices, if you will, that are in our life and in our heart, and those things that even before, with our family, the way we grew up, the way our families grew up, these things that are passed down aren't just traditional, they're spiritual.
Right.
And it's important for Jesus to allow the gospel to shine a light on those things so that we could be, there are things that we should be handing to the Lord. We may not be aware that we should be handing to them.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was recently in a conversation with some people, and we're talking about Proverbs chapter 4, and I was talking about a father passing on wisdom to his son, and it's talking about how he's passing on what's been given to him. And in my conversation with these people, I was talking about the fact that the primary teacher of a child is their parent.
Yeah.
Even if you're a poor parent, you're teaching your child something.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so, like, that you're really parents. The point of our conversation was that parents are really charged with the responsibility to pass on good doctrine, pass on good morals.
Oh, absolutely.
But at the same time, it's important for a child to understand what's right and what's wrong too. We are responsible for ourselves. And so some people, they have this tendency to blame their wearies and their woes on other people.
Right, yeah.
But we've got to go, you know what? I'm going to own up to this. I'm going to take my next step. and I'm going to be what God's called me to be.
Oh, yeah,
and
absolutely.
I'm going to wait on the Lord myself. Instead of waiting for grandma who's been praying for 30 years, I'm going to wait on the Lord now.
Oh, yeah, when Jesus showed up on the scene, he didn't his first words in his public ministry, he came to people, he said, man, repent, the kingdom of heaven is hand. He didn't start his public ministry by talking about what their fathers and their forefathers had done and what. No, he came to them, hey, I'm here now.
Right.
I'm here to show you what you're supposed to do, and this is your opportunity to follow me, to put your nets down, so if you will, to put down what you already know, and to come after me and to follow me. And when we do that, we enter into an arena to where we have access to God's strength.
Word.
You know, it's like being in a hallway and seeing the door, and we open that door. You know, Jesus is the door, and we come to that door. Now we're in a place, we're in a room where we're in His presence, and now we have access to those things, and and it's up to us to wait, to open that door and to wait on the Lord. A lot of times, man, we have problems with the timing of God.
Oh yeah,
we often do. We have problems with God's timing, you know, and sometimes the hardest thing for us to do is to wait. And if we read our promise, it says, they that wait upon the Lord, it is conditional upon us waiting.
Yeah.
You know, God is smart. I tell my kids all the time, I'm smarter than you, bro. You know, I know what I'm doing. And God is smarter than us. He knows what He's doing. He sees the beginning from the end. He has that 50,000-foot bird's eye view of life and where we are and what's ahead of us. And we don't see all of that. So there's a trapping for us there to not be patient and to not wait upon the Lord. But the fulfillment of that promise right there in Isaiah is conditional upon us waiting on God's timing. And I know that's a tough pill to swallow. It's a hard pill for me to swallow as well, but that promise fulfilling itself is conditional upon us, because when we do that, we're saying, God, I trust you.
Absolutely.
God, I know that you know your ideas, your thoughts are above my thoughts, your ways are above my ways. And me being willing to wait is me saying, God, I trust you.
Word.
And that's what these promises have been about since the beginning of the year, is us trusting the promises of God. And in every area and arena of our life that these promises are highlighting, saying, God, I'm willing to trust you here.
Yeah. So good. So good. So, Carlos, how does this promise, how has it played out in your life?
Well, I can tell you this. You know, with being able to wait on the promise of God, you know, there's always the trapping of trying to produce the will of God on your own. You know, and it would be, even when I showed up here, man, that's where I was exhausted, man.
Really?
My wife and I showed up here at the healing place. I hadn't even, my family wasn't with me. The first time I came here, I was alone. My wife she had still went to the place that we had went to previously. You know, we were trying to balance out, you know, where we were and what we wanted to do. And we are part of an idea and a mentality that it was about my abilities, about me harnessing my talents, and about me doing X, Y, Z, and becoming this person. And I'm telling you, it really was rooted in a lot of flesh. And trying to produce the will of God. I'm telling you that trying to produce the will of God on your own, with your own ability, it will be exhausting. And I remember that first service there, you know, Matt, he came over to me, and it was after the service. It was during the time of prayer. It was the prayer time, and he walked over to me, and I was a manager at a tech center this time. He said, I don't know what it is about you. He said, but people have to listen to you. He said, you're in a position where people have to listen to you, but God is going to show you that what you think you know is not what you really know, and that He's going to show you something different. He's going to show you a new way of doing things. And it was like something was lifted off of me, because I've been not waiting on the Lord. I'm not trusting the timing of God, and I'm trying to produce this thing on my own. And I just use this analogy where it was like, to me, I was like, in my mind, here I am. I'm standing with my back to the sun. Just imagine the sun being behind me. As I always said, I was standing with my back to the sun, and I'm focused on the shadow, and I'm too intelligent to realize that that's me that's standing in the way.
Yeah.
And I was trying to produce this thing on my own, and God taught me to trust Him, and taught me that if I'm willing to wait on Him, that waiting is not necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot of things, good things that come out of waiting.
Right.
There are a lot of the Bible talks about how patience, how it produces perseverance, how there's all these things of maturity come out of it, and that even the waiting, there's there's the work of God to come through that ends in the renewal of our strength and the rejuvenation of our spirit and clarity and spiritual, mental, and emotional clarity that comes out of waiting on God, what He wants to do in His timing. And I've walked that. It's not something that I read in the book somewhere. It's something that I walked and it's real in my life.
Right.
And God had to teach me and my family these lessons for real.
Awesome. So what do you say to people, though, Carlos, that, man, they've been walking this stuff out for a while, and they're struggling right now, and they're like, Carlos, I see what you're saying. I'm trying to do that, but it's not happening for me. Like, I'm growing tired. I'm growing weary of waiting. Yeah. What do you say to those people?
Well, I use this analogy all the time. My children don't have to worry about, they don't have to worry about, where the next meal is coming from. They don't have to worry about, how the bills are going to get paid or things of that nature. Is that their proximity to me and their relationship with me guarantees that those things will be taken care of. And that's how we have to look at the Lord. That in a relationship with God, I have to examine, am I truly trusting the Lord? My proximity to God and my relationship with Him through Jesus Christ guarantees me the outcome is going to be for His glory and for my good. And that the promise says He will renew their strength.
Right.
Like I said before, not that He can, not that He may, but He will renew their strength.
Absolutely.
And that's so important that we understand that our closeness, our proximity to God is that even when we're doing the right things, it can feel like this isn't panning out. I'll think about in the Bible, if you read in Genesis chapter 29, you hear about Jacob. Jacob went to his homeland, to his uncle Laban, to find a wife. They made an agreement. They said, he fell in love with Rachel. Rachel was the one that he wanted. Now, Rachel had a sister named Leah as well.
Right.
And he agreed with Laban, hey, I'll work for you 7 years. And, in exchange for that, the prize is Rachel. The prize is the woman that I love.
Right.
And in that, Jacob did everything he was supposed to do. I could see him in my mind's eye tending the flock and working crops and all of the tasks that it takes for 7 years. And the Bible said it didn't even feel like that to him.
Right.
And that he labored and did the right thing. But, when it came to the end of those 7 years, they had the wedding ceremony. He was supposed to marry Rachel. Laban pulled a fast one on him.
Yeah.
That morning he woke up, man, it was Leah.
Right.
It wasn't Rachel. And here this guy, man, I can imagine in his mind, he's like, I did what I was supposed to do. Everything I did was I held up my end of the deal, and here I am. I'm not seeing what I wanted to out of it.
Right.
But God had a plan out of all of that.
Absolutely.
And He worked another 7 years. It was God's time for Him to work another 7 years, and He got Rachel. But so many great things came out of Leah.
Yeah.
So even Judah, the line of the tribe of Judah, which is the lineage of Jesus Christ, Judah was the son of Rachel. Was the son of Leah, not the son of Rachel.
Right.
And God had a plan in all of that.
Right.
So you could be in a place, in a situation where it feels like, God, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. But we have to really trust God, that God knows and He's on the throne. He understands what's happening here.
Right.
And that there is something, even in your waiting, even in the things that feel like disappointments to us, that God's perspective is greater, and that there can be great things that come out of what we see as a potential disappointment, because God sees the whole picture.
Right.
He sees the whole thing.
That's so good. I remember years ago we did a series called Threads, and it was kind of along that same time set. And for those of you maybe you're new, Threads was a series where we talked about how there's a tapestry that God's creating. And for us, when we look at the tapestry of our life, we have this tendency to go, I want to take out these dark spots, these hard spots, we don't like it, but then the picture's incomplete.
Yes.
And they don't realize that those dark spots were meant to be shadowing. They're meant to bring depth to the greater image that Christ is making.
Yeah, sometimes we're so close to the situation, it's almost can't see the forest from the trees.
Right.
That you can't see, what those things, it looks ugly to you. You get really close to a masterpiece painting. It just seems like blotches, but when you back up and you have that perspective that God has,
right.
it's a complete picture. And those things that seem like mistakes, they're details.
Right.
They're not mistakes, they're details. It's something that's so much bigger.
That's so good. Put that in the chat. They're not mistakes, they're details. Put that in the chat right now, because I think that is a key phrase. I think a lot of people need to have a kind of a change in their mind, a shifting of what they're dealing with. There's things that take place. Okay, let's take a moment and go to the next. Let's make a movement to the next moment that we have. So, Carlos, as we kind of bring this thing to a close, before we go back into another time of worship, and I'm going to encourage you guys, don't log out just yet. We'll stay with us for the worship. In the back end, I'm going to be back. We'll talk about your next step and how we can walk with you through that next step. But how do you wrap this up? Look at that camera right there and tell them, last statement, what is the one thing you want them to walk away with this message?
I want you to walk away with the idea that your strength, I want you to walk away with the idea that your strength is exactly what it's supposed to be. It's your strength. It's not God's strength. That you can have what you need from God. And that's really what it's about. It's about, just like our promise is, that he that waits upon the Lord, that he will renew your strength, that you won't faint, that you'll run, you won't grow weary, that you won't, that the thing that tries to overcome you, that it doesn't have the ability to overcome you, because, and Scott even said this in last week's message, that it's really not on us to do things that are extraordinary.
Absolutely.
It's not on you. The key thing that we have to take away from this is that we need access to God's strength. That is on us to get God's strength, and that we get that simply by waiting and trusting the Lord. If you're out there and you're tired, you're right in the center of the will of God, and you're tired, man, wait on God. Wait on God. Trust that he knows what he's doing. And that when you do that, we're walking into that room of trust and faith, and we have access to his goodness, grace, and his strength to renew us.
So good. So good.